Well, congrats, and thank you for doing
Yeah,
that. Well,
that's all right.
well,
So what do you want? How's it looking?
yeah. How do you? Just one sec. Let me talk to our producer.
Yeah,
Hey,
yeah.
Arden. We might. Sid, is the computer resting on your lap right now?
No, I'm using my phone.
Oh, your phone. Okay, wow. Um, so we might want to get it.
Can you push his screen to horizontal?
Can you push your? Can you make your? Yeah,
That's better.
yeah. That's better. Whatever you did
Yeah.
there is
And
good.
then
All right. Was I okay sitting
yeah,
back on the sofa? Sometimes it breaks
Yeah,
up.
yeah. Let's have you sit down.
Okay. I'll see. I'll just make sure the signal doesn't start breaking up.
The
This
best
house
reception.
is like 1800s, very thick walls.
Yeah,
Not great for Wi-Fi.
right.
No, you guys are breaking up now. I'm going to go back through here.
Okay.
Let's try the stairs. Too dark, too light.
Um,
Light behind.
if you stay right there so that your head
Yeah,
is
no, but
blocking the light.
yeah, no, it's
Yeah.
not great. Let me try over here.
Okay.
This might be a bit dark. How's that?
Yeah.
okay, is it gonna be able to sit there the whole time and not move?
Yeah. Can you?
Yeah, how
you
long? How long?
We'll talk for about 10 minutes or so.
Yeah, yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Okay. Is it resting on
You don't
We're
mind
not
getting a
gonna.
little bit bending.
We're not gonna make you do squats or anything. So.
Okay.
Yeah. Does that work for you?
Yeah, is the phone resting on something so it's not gonna
You're
move?
just holding the phone, right?
Yeah,
Okay. As long as you just hold it kind of as steady as you can.
I'll do my best.
Okay. And we can even maybe do this quicker than 10 minutes. So we'll just talk and we will edit this down to the best 3 or 4 minutes.
Okay.
Then we'll run it at pub date. So obviously a sort of omnibus collection here that goes into the past and your previous stories. It gives us sort of a chance to talk about your life with Rebus. And one of my questions is, obviously you can't predict the future, but when you first began to write about him, did you know right away that he was someone you wanted to spend so much time writing about?
No, I had no sense that he would continue past the very first book. And the first draft of that first book, he is shot and killed at the end.
Right.
And for some reason, I decided in the second draft to bring him back to life. But no, he was never meant to stick around for longer than one book, one story. I wasn't a fan of crime fiction, so I didn't realize you could even write a series, There was going to be one book with that guy, then he was gone.
Right. And so, but what was it then that made you want to bring him back?
My editor, because the books I wrote after that were not well received and not selling particularly well. I did one spy novel where I was attempting to be John le Carré meets Graham Greene. That was called Watchmen. And then I did a sort of techno thriller without knowing any technology, as you can tell from this interview, a techno thriller called West Wind. And neither of them had done particularly well. And my editor said, well, whatever happened to that guy Rebus? I liked him. So I thought, oh, maybe I'll bring him back then and we'll try again. Yeah. And the first book, Noughts and Crosses, the first book with Rebus was meant to be an updating of themes that are there in Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, but bringing the story back to Edinburgh. But nobody had got it. Nobody had realized that. It was just a thriller. It was a mystery novel. It was a detective story. So I then wrote a novel called Hide and Seek, where the name Hyde is implicit in the title. And still nobody got it. But it was a second Rebus novel. And by then I was quite happy with him, so he stuck around. Yeah. I didn't know he was going to stick around this long. It's like a life sentence.
Right. But, Edinburgh is just obviously just as much of a character in your work as he is. You have some interesting things to say on your site about writing about Edinburgh. One of the, I mean, being a literary guy, I guess the one that interested me the most was your interest in Muriel Spark.
Oh
Uh,
yeah.
but you know, the prime of Miss Jean Brodie is a very different kind of Edinburgh than your, I guess, darker take on the city. Tell me about your interest in her work and how yours diverges from hers, obviously.
Yeah, well, I mean, my undergraduate degree was in American literature. I specialized in American literature. And then when I finished, when I graduated, I wanted to stick around the university. So I decided to apply to do a PhD, to do a doctorate. And I was going to do it on Thomas Pynchon, my favorite American novelist. And Edinburgh University basically said, you won't get money from, you know, the state education system here to study an American writer. And I said, well, who would I get money from the state to study? And they said, well, there's not much. This one particular professor, he said, there's not much on Muriel Spark. I said, well, Miss Jean Brodie? He went, yeah, she's written 25 other books. He said, go away and read them and see what you think. And that turned into what's become a lifelong obsession with Muriel Spark, who, you know, sometimes people thought of her as being quite a light writer, quite humorous, but there's a real darkness at the core of her books. There's darkness in The Prime of Miss Jean Brodie, and there's darkness in many of her other books, Girls of Slender Means, The Driver's Seat, which is an extraordinary why done it, where a victim goes looking for someone to kill them. And she was, you know, there's a lot of stuff there. But she introduced me. Miss Jean Brodie is descended from a real Edinburgh character called Deacon William Brodie, who was gentleman by day and ran with a gang by night, breaking into people's houses and stealing from them. And he was eventually hanged in Edinburgh. So he was the template for Jekyll and Hyde to a certain extent. And as a craftsman, as a carpenter, he had built a wardrobe, which was in the bedroom, the childhood bedroom of Robert Louis Stevenson.
Oh.
And Stevenson's nursemaid would tell him the story of this guy who was gentleman by day and thief by night. And so I was getting from Spark, I got to Stevenson, and from Stevenson, I got to this real dark other side of Edinburgh, you know. The fact that Edinburgh was these two cities, as all cities are, a city of light and shade, a city of haves and have-nots. But structurally, it's there in Edinburgh. There is the new town and the old town, two distinct parts of Edinburgh, one of which is chaotic and you know, was eventually supposedly replaced by the much more genteel and rational new town. So you've got the two there, and that's all crime fiction is about. That all crime fiction looks at the connection between the light and the dark.
Yeah. But how, I mean, just, you know, as with Rebus, you need to find new stories for him. How do you continue to get inspiration from Edinburgh, though, after so much time writing?
The thing about Edinburgh is it's a really small city. It's easy for people to get their head around it. If you came here as a tourist or a visitor, you could walk around the relevant parts of the city in 2 or 3 days and feel you were getting to know it. But having lived more than half my life here, there's always something else. There's something that Edinburgh is keeping hidden from you. There's some secrets from its past. There are underground streets that have never been excavated. There are mysteries. And behind these thick Georgian and Victorian walls of these very prestigious houses, anything could be happening. Behind the net curtains, anything could be happening. And so it's a city that on the surface looks genteel and sophisticated and cultured and civilized, but you scratch away at that surface and you find it's got quite a dark history and also quite a lot of stuff happening in the present. You look at Train Spotting, you know, Irvine Welsh. Irvine Welsh was one of these people who said to the world, look, there's more to Edinburgh than Sir Walter Scott and tartan and whiskey and bagpipes and golf and the castle and Greyfriars Bobby. There's a real living, breathing, contemporary city with real problems. And that's what I was trying to pick up in my crime fiction.
Yeah. And so, I mean, obviously people know you for Rebus, but you have secondary characters that your readers love. Is there a favorite one of those that you have?
Oh, well, I mean, you know, I mean, the characters stick around in my books if I like them. If I don't like them, tend to die horrible deaths or be forgotten about or sent elsewhere, you know.
Yeah.
Siobhan Clarke, Rebus's colleague, sidekick to a certain extent, I mean, she came along because I needed someone to ask Rebus the questions that the reader wanted to ask. So it's the Holmes and Watson thing. You need the sidekick to say, look, how could you possibly know that? Why are we going here? What's going on? But then she took on a life of her own. She became very three-dimensional. I liked hanging out with her. I liked what she did as a character and how she bounced off Rebus. She's a very different character to him, and she's learned some good and bad lessons from him, but has gone off to be her own woman. And in the previous Rebus book, she became his boss because he got busted back down to detective sergeant, and she's risen through the ranks, so she now outranks him, which is a lovely kind of twist in their relationship. So she's an interesting one. Then Cafferty, the villain who runs Edinburgh, Rebus's Mr. Hyde, I guess. You know, he was meant to be a very minor character in book 3, but he just stuck around because he got beneath my skin. And I thought, there's a lot I can do with you as a character. You can represent that Mr. Hyde face of Edinburgh, and tell the reader something about it. And Malcolm Fox came along as a detective to replace Rebus when Rebus retired quite a few years ago. When I thought I'd lost Rebus forever because he'd hit retirement age. And Malcolm, the first book, it was tough. You know, I really had to work hard to make him interesting to me because he's very much a team guy. He lives a quiet life. He's sociable. He doesn't drink. He has no bad habits. He has no vices. Tough to make that kind of person interesting in fiction. That's why we like our maverick cops. But he stuck around. He refused to leave. So, I'm kind of stuck with those 4, really, kind of sort of dance of, I don't want to say a dance of death because I never know what's going to happen to them, but they're kind of all umbilically linked.
Yeah. So last question. There's a new novella in this collection. Death is Not the End. So I just was curious, what was it like for you to go back to Rebus's childhood?
It's always interesting because he shares a lot of my characteristics. We were born in the same village, basically a coal mining village called Cardenden in Fife. But he left school at 15. He wasn't clever enough to go to college or university. He joined the police. He joined the army. When he was kicked out of the army, he eventually joined the police. So we've got kind of similar backgrounds, but they diverge at certain points. And he's also older than me. So I've always got to try and think myself into the head of someone who grew up and did most of his growing up in the 60s, the early 60s, whereas I did most of my growing up in the early 70s. But it's, you know, it's great to get back to what made him, you know, what makes him the guy that he is. The reason I keep writing about him is I still haven't unpeeled the onion. You know, there are layer upon layer upon layer. And every time I think I know what makes this guy tick, I find out something else about him. For example, his name, Rebus, it means picture puzzle. It's a puzzle, but it's actually also a Polish surname. And someone told me that a few years ago, and ever since they told me that, there's a guy in Edinburgh called Rebus. He has that same surname. There's only one. But he told me that it's Polish. And so ever since then, I've known that Rebus was Polish. So whenever I need to talk about xenophobia or immigration or people trafficking, he has that background. And that's a part of his life that I have yet to explore fully, is the Polish antecedents. So maybe I'll get to that eventually, if I stick around.
Yeah. Right.
Will I stick around? I don't know.
Well, great. Well, thanks so much for your time. If we wore your arm out, send us the hospital bill.
This was a dawdle. Look, I'm used to lifting pints. If I can lift a pint of beer, I can lift a very small phone. Come on.
Yeah. Okay.
Nice talking to you, though.
Okay. Have a good day.
Take care.
Okay.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.